Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life, learning experience that I've had, and I just share a lot of my personal life with you, which I do on all of my channels. But this one is specifically the stories of my life. And today I'm not gonna read anything. Today I'm just gonna completely ad-lib this. I've been reading a lot of vlogs the last couple days. I've read about trans youth suicides and the Pulse shootings, and I read about my mother's passing, and I read about the day before I got sober. That's one of my favorite posts. But today I want to talk about something completely different. Well, not completely different, kind of related to that, but I get a lot of messages, like an overwhelming amount of messages from people talking to me about addiction. And you know, honestly, when I started talking about it on my channels and, you know, being open about being sober and being in recovery, I honestly didn't think that I would get the overwhelming amount of response that I get. And, you know, right now I have like 200 plus emails that I haven't been able to get to. I literally get to, I think, like 50 emails a day and on and on and on. But like, I would say that 80% of them are all like advice about addiction or a family member or a friend. And like, that is so amazing, you know? And be patient with me, please. And I know in a lot of these situations, it's life or death. So if that is that and you're not getting a response from me, please contact somebody as an emergency. But you know, like, that's a really cool thing that just from my simple story that I'm able to like impact so many people, like just with my small story that is very tragic, much of it, you know? And I never would have thought in those, you know, 10 years that I was using, I started using when I was 12 regularly, and I got sober when I was 22. So for the 10 years that I was using, I never would have ever in a million years, honest to God, I never would have ever imagined that someday I would be sharing stories of that other people would be like, oh wow, like I relate to that, or you know, can you please give me some advice for this, or on and on and on. And every time I do a video and I talk about a problematic YouTuber, which I did today on my main channel, and their drug use or whatever, you know, I always like want to tell more. Like there's always like more personal stories I want to tell. And I'm so thankful now that I have this platform, this channel to do that on this platform. Like I'm a Miss America contestant. No, like I'm so happy that I have this channel now, you know, to talk about it. And one of the overwhelming questions that I get is, and this is just, anything I say on here is just based on my experience, my advice. It's not expertise. You know, please hunt out your own answers for yourselves. But one of the overwhelming questions I get from people is, you know, like, how do I talk to my kids about addiction? Or how do I confront a friend that has an addiction issue, or I'm worried about their drug or alcohol use? And so I'm going to talk about that at the end of this video. But I wanted to tell you guys today about the very first time that I ever used. And I think it's like kind of an important story to tell, especially in the context of me having just told you the last day before I got sober. Now, I will tell you that I grew up in a very, very, very liberal home, okay? I mean, politics aside, my mother was a complete liberal, my dad was a conservative, but like issues, like any kind of issues, gay issues, all that kind of, neither one of them cared about that shit. And they were both of them completely, as well as my stepmother, supportive. But issues like smoking cigarettes when I was in high school, like they were not happy about it, but like it wasn't like a huge issue, you know? Or like drinking when I was younger, like it wasn't a huge issue. Like it wasn't something that I think they were really consumed and worried about. And both of my parents were drinkers. My mother was a recovering alcoholic. She got sober 6 months after I did. I'll probably tell lots of stories on here about my mother's use and how it affected me, because I think it's really important for me to tell the stories of being a child of an alcoholic and growing up in that fear or that unknowing of I didn't know what I was going to walk into on a daily basis, and how like I gave up at some point, you know? Like I think when I finally said to my mom, you know, like you need to figure out yourself and I need to figure out myself, and I need to take care of myself and get sober, and if you do, that's great, but if you don't, I mean, I can't be around that. Not until then was I really willing to not be affected by it anymore. Physically, emotionally, it still just killed me, you know? And years after my mom got sober, it still did. And listen, we did a lot of work on it together, and one of the things that is the coolest is that, you know, before my mom passed away, she would have been sober. She was a month shy, less than a month shy. She was like 26 days shy of having 13 years of sobriety. And her sponsor brought her 13-year coin to me and said, do you want to bury your mom with it? And I said, no, my mom she didn't believe in, we don't borrow time. So she would have been very proud with her 12 years and 11 months and 4 days or 14 days or something like that. In 12 days it was. And, but one of the coolest things was that I was able to have an adult relationship with my mother where she was the mother and I was the child because the addiction was no longer present. And I'm so, so happy that I was able to have that, and people say to me all the time, your mom would be so happy. She would be so proud of you. I know my mom would be proud of me. I know she would. She wouldn't get all of this. Trust me, she wouldn't. But my mom would be like, I'm very, very proud of you for putting your message out there. If she was still alive, she'd say, but don't you dare put my message out there, because she was a believer in anonymity. But you know what? It's my story to tell now, so I'm going to. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the first day that I used, because before that, I grew up on sailboats in upstate Michigan, in the summers, and my dad always was drinking 40-ounce Fosters, and, he'd be like, here, kids, not the great role model, but he did, and, if I wanted a sip of wine or something, they let me have a sip of wine, if they were going to toast champagne, they put, this much in a champagne glass on New Year's. It wasn't like they were getting me drunk, but they, were pretty liberal with that kind of stuff compared to, I think, parents today. Now, I will tell you this. My parents were very, very against parents that served alcohol to kids that were under 21. When I was in high school, I didn't tell them that we were going to those kind of parties, but they were really against that, right? And my mom would call the parents and she'd be like, now, is there gonna be alcohol there? If a parent was honest and was like, yeah, I'd rather have them drink in my house. I hate this, by the way, okay? As a counselor that has worked in this field for 22 years, I hate this when people say this, okay? I'd rather have them drink in my home than out on the streets. No, 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 no. What you just did was you condoned your underage child drinking, okay? I just wanna make that very, very clear. When you allow your child to drink on spring break in Mexico, you've just condoned them drinking under the age of 21, okay? When you condone them drinking at a wedding, you've just condoned them drinking under the age of 21. When you allow them to do all of those things, what you've just said is, A, it's okay to break the law if your parent says yes, and so they're gonna hope that you can get them out of any legal consequence they get themselves into. I'm speaking from experience, okay? And from working with it, I'm no longer a counselor, but when I was, from working with it, and from when I was going through that myself, I can remember being 16 years old and we went to St. Martin and my dad literally let me drink the whole trip. The whole trip. And I got so hooked on Sambuca, which if you don't know what it is, I thought I was rather bougie, okay? And I would drink Sambuca on ice. And I can remember when we got back and it was some weekend and we were sitting around and I said to my dad, can I have a Sambuca? And he goes, are you crazy? He was like, no, that was on vacation. But see, I didn't understand that. Because as adolescents and as children, our minds don't develop. And one of the things that you need to understand is that the point that you start using drugs and alcohol, we stop developing emotionally, okay? So if you have a 22-year-old or a 24-year-old, like some that I talked about today, or a 19-year-old, that has been using since they were 12 years old, what you're really dealing with is a 24-year-old that acts like they're 12. And I'm sure many of you that have contacted me out there totally relate to this, right? So all of that was before, and I had snuck drinks, things like that. We all do, take a cigarette and go sneak it out back. And maybe we don't all do that, but that's what I did. And because I was that kid, I always wanted to be at the party. I was always around these adult parties, and I wanted to be smoking cigarettes and drinking. It looked so cool to me. My mother just sitting there, she still, to the day she died, she smoked like Betty Davis. I thought it was cool, And my mother was a very, until she had her face down in a plate on the dinner table, which happened many times, my mother was a very pretty drinker. And so I've talked about that a lot in my vlog because that's the name of a book that I wanted to write about my mom. But and then when I was 12, I can remember, 12 or 13, I read Little Girl Lost by Drew Barrymore. And I mean to tell you, I was snorting Smarties because I wanted people to think that I was a cocaine addict at 13. There was something not right with that picture. What my parents never told me was that I had a long history of addiction in my family. Had they educated me on that, I don't know that it would have made any difference. I really don't. I don't know that I understood that enough or we understood that enough that it would have stopped me. But today we have resources of educating people about that. So if you have addiction in your family, I don't care if your child is 4 years old, start educating them on that, okay? Have that be a conversation that you have in your home at any given time. It's like I said in my Leela Alcorn thing, we can never be too young to start talking about, same-sex love and marriage equality, and we can, and people disagree with me on this all the time, and that's fine. You can disagree with me. I totally respect your opinion, and gender and all those kinds of things. We can never start too early talking about drugs and alcohol with our children, and you don't have to tell them your stories, okay? You don't have to say to your 10-year-old, well, when mom was in college, she used to smoke pot every day. No. We don't do that, okay? We don't have to tell them all of our stories, but you can educate them on what's out there, and if they say to you, did you ever use drugs and alcohol? You can say yes. You can be honest and say, you know what? And pick and choose what you say in the lesson. But mom chose to stop using it. When I got pregnant with you, I stopped drinking the way that I used to drink. And now I only drink like on occasion. And you've seen that, right? I will tell you this, it's hard to be a teacher when you can't take the lesson. So if you're giving out lessons to your child and you are taking in return, and you're out there with that problematic behavior that maybe needs to be considered as substance abuse or addiction, and you're not willing to take a look at that, they aren't going to listen to anything that you have to say. So first, as parents and family members and friends, we have to kind of clean up our own act. If you're a friend out there, I'm getting to the end part before I even get to the beginning. If you're a friend out there and you, haven't been willing to say something to your friend, but you're really scared about them, go to their parents. Go to a teacher. Do not be concerned about this friend never talking to you again. You would rather have that friend alive down the road and be angry at you than that friend dead on the street. Trust me, I have lived that truth. I have shut my mouth and not said anything because I was fearful that somebody would be mad at me, and later wished that I had done everything I possibly could. It is a really, really hard piece of guilt to live with, And that being said, if somebody wants to use, they're going to use. So no matter what you do, if somebody wants to use and they end up dying as a result of that, or in prison or jail or detention, it's going to happen. I want to share this story with you because I want to show you how innocently this all can start. By the time that I got sober, I was using everything under the sun that is imaginable. I was using between $500 and $1,000 worth of cocaine a day. I had started smoking crack cocaine at the end. I was drinking all day long. I was smoking marijuana. Now, I want to tell you, $500 to $1,000, and I had no money. So I don't know where that money was coming from. I was selling shit left and right. I was stealing and selling shit left and right. I'm not proud of it. It's interesting. My stepmom said to my dad a week before I got sober, Peter's going to start prostituting. Or my dad said, I'm worried that Peter's going to start prostituting. And my stepmom said, how do you know he isn't already? And but for the grace of God, if you believe in all of that, whatever you believe in, I never started prostituting. That being said, I won't say that I didn't participate in promiscuous sex with people that I wouldn't have, because I knew that they had drugs and alcohol. I don't know if that makes sense, but to me today, that is a form of prostitution. I prostituted my soul, I prostituted my body in exchange for other things. It was never spoken, but I did it. And I'm not proud of that. But I think that's a learning experience we have to go through. Not all of us. I hope many of you learn from my experience, The first day that I used was a summer, and I was 11 turning 12 years old. My best friend and I met two girls at the playground of the elementary school that I went to. We brought the alcohol that we stole from his dad, and we brought a pack of cigarettes that I stole from my mom because she always bought cartons. And the four of us sat there and we drank. And I mean to tell you, we drank cream de menthe, we drank brandy, we drank vodka. I mean, we drank so many. I know cream de menthe was in it because they were puking, and they were puking green. And the three of them, I will never forget, sat there and got so sick. We're vomiting all over the place. And you hear this a lot in the rooms of 12-step programs, what I'm about to tell you. I was on a swing, and I will never forget, it was the clearest night ever. And still, when I am out in the country late at night in the summer, or I'm in Mexico or some island or, somewhere where there's not a lot of city around and the stars are super bright, and I have that warm feeling inside of me from being out in the sun all day long and getting sunburnt, which is why I like to go out in the sun still. I was on the swing set while my friends were puking around me at my feet. And I will never forget, I could not get high enough into those clouds, that stars, and I had never felt more perfect in my entire life. The next 10 years, I chased that high. I chased that feeling, and I can remember walking home with my friend that night, and he said to me, I don't ever want to do this again. And all I could think was, I can't wait to do this again. And he's not an alcoholic. He's never had any problems with alcohol or drugs. And in fact, he's very, very successful. And, and he and I both have a lot of the same issues, I mean, he had sexuality issues that neither one of us knew at the time that, he's gay and out and all that kind of stuff, and comes from a very conservative family. So it's not we had all these issues and one of us turned one way and the other didn't turn the other way. I truly think for me, it was that I had this predisposition for addiction, I drank all through high school. I'm not going to tell my whole story right here, but I do want to tell a little bit of it because I think it's important. That magical night that I always remember with the stars so bright and how warm it was, and it was just absolutely amazing outside. And I literally still, to this day, have a clear image of that in my head. And, you know, that's a sad cry from 10 years later at 22 when I should have been on a college campus hanging out with my friends, you know, reading books and being this, you know, intellectual phony that I thought I was, instead of puking off the side of my bed from drinking, you know, a 1/5 of Jack Daniels in a day, plus, you know, 4 to 5, you know, malt liquors, you know, 40 ounces of Colt 45 that I was obsessed with. I would drink anything. I mean, I drank all the time, you know, to taking 5 to 10 Vicodin in a day, which had effect on my organs by the time I got treatment. I was told that that my liver looked like that of a 50-year-old man when I was 22. It was very, very scary. And, you know, here I was with an ashtray turned over on my bed. It was very important to me that I had all white sheets and white comforter and all that kind of stuff in my bed. I had an ashtray turned over that had, I don't know, something like 100 cigarette butts in it. And I'll never forget my friend who got sober right after me. She came in here. I had my door propped open, and probably been propped open for 4 or 5 days because of the pizza man, so he could come and go. And she came in. I would just go and leave a 20 at the top of the stairs, and then he would come in and take the 20 and leave the pizza because I didn't want to see anybody. And she came in and she looked at me and she goes, "This looks like a really bad, like, beef French film. What's going on here?" And I said, "I don't even care if I live or die anymore. I really don't. I have nothing to live for." And I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't care. And that's terrifying to me, you know? That for 10 years I had chased that fun and that feeling and that excitement. And I will tell you that in that 10 years, I had a lot of fun and I had a lot of excitement and I had a lot of days that are 10 times better than that day on that playground drinking and drugging. I really did, and I would be a liar if I didn't sit here and tell you. But the consequences were 10 times worse. And the fact that I almost killed myself was even worse than that. Be willing to stand up for yourself. Be willing to stand up for your friends. Be willing to stand up for your children. Protect them at any cost. It doesn't matter if they're angry at you. If they really care about you and you're really a good friend, if they get help and they do something about it, down the road they'll thank you. I thanked a lot of people that were willing to stand up for me and say something. And you know, I think in the end, you have to ask yourself, who do you want to be in this world? I love you guys, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.